We're really excited. This is our first webinar panel of the week. We've got a lot more coming, but we're starting off really strong. So welcome, David and Shelley.
Hi, Joe. Hi, everybody.
So we're going to get going in a couple of minutes. So if you need to get a cup of tea, water, juice, coffee, whatever your poison is this morning, please feel free to get it, because we're not going to start for a couple of minutes. I know that on a Monday, people will have drop off, they'll have calls depending on what time zone you're in. So we don't tend to start for a couple of minutes after 9:15, just to give you a little bit of time to chill and to get in the zone. But we're really excited to be talking to you about learning and development strategy and the future of learning. Now, you may remember from the publicity about this that we should have 3 people. Unfortunately, Dua is really unwell. She's got a bad case of the flu and she's actually in hospital. So we send her our best, but she won't be able to, for obvious reasons, join our discussion today. So never fear. We're going to fill in the details and we're going to cover excellently this morning. And that's not going to phase us at all. And if you do hear any snoring during this webinar, I have to apologize in advance. My Frenchie, our chief dog officer, Dylan, is sitting by me looking very regal this morning, as if butter wouldn't melt. But I'm sure you'll probably see Dylan pop up. Normally does. So never fear, Dylan is here. So please put into the chat. We're going to start in a minute, if you can, where you're from, and what organization you work for. It's brilliant to see so many people coming in, but it's always lovely to know who we're talking to. And please get your questions at the ready. We are going to talk a little bit at you about strategy and give you some good examples, but we really want this to be as interactive as possible. So questions abound. That would be fantastic. So welcome to those people that are coming in. Thank you so much for putting in where you're coming from. So we've got people from Carlisle, from Edinburgh, Basingstoke, Leeds. Are we just talking about Leeds, Gina? Liverpool, West Midlands. Oh, hi, Helen. Andy from Woking, Bedfordshire. We've got a plethora of UK covered today. Northern Ireland, Bicester. Oh, I like a bit of Bicester, Martina.
Bicester.
Love a bit of Bicester. Oh, lovely. South Wales, brilliant. Luxembourg, fantastic. Wonderful. Nottingham, brilliant. Okay, we'll keep them coming. Keep telling us where you're from and do get your questions at the ready. So we're going to start and we're going to kick off. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for signing up to the first Learning at Work Week 2026 panel of the year. So I'm really delighted to have David and Shelley, who I know very well and I know are going to bring huge amounts of enthusiasm, energy and insight to you today. So I'm going to hand over to them and I'm going to ask them to do just a little bit of an intro, if you don't mind, guys, of your role and why this is kind of important to you. So, David, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm David James, Chief Learning Officer at 360 Learning. I'm also host of the Learning and Development podcast, which I'm fortunate to say is the world's most listened to L&D podcast with more than 1 million downloads so far. And formerly, and I met Joe when I was Director of Learning Talent and OD for the Walt Disney Company at the European headquarters.
Amazing. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, David. That's fantastic. Shelley.
Me. Hi, everybody. I'm Shelley. I'm Head of People Experience at the Cumberland Building Society. Worked in learning and HR since the ripe old age of 21. So I'm into 20 years of loving this profession. I think, Joe, you asked, why this topic? Why is it important to you? I really believe that work can be so much better, and I think learning's got such an integral part to the culture within an organisation. Yeah, so it's hugely important with ensuring that everybody enjoys what they do.
Amazing. And for those that didn't hear me say, I'm so sorry that Dua won't be here today. She sends her apologies, but she's really unwell in hospital at the moment. So she just can't be with us. But never fear, we are going to cover the AI area of learning and development. So you won't miss out, but get well soon, Dua. We hope to see you on a webinar panel really, really soon. So let's dive in. I think let's get going because we've done a lot of chatting pre this. But David, I'm going to throw to you first, and I'm going to ask you, what does the future of workplace learning really look like, and how do you make it work in practice?
So a nice easy one to start with then, Joe.
I'm using you in.
Well, I did omit my reason why I think that this is important, and so I'll link it into this. I'm writing my first book at the moment. It's about politics, power, and influence in relationship to learning and development, and why we find ourselves in similar positions regardless of geography, company, and industry. And one of the people that I interviewed for the book is Hilary Miller, who is Chief Learning Officer at HCA Healthcare. And she says that more than anything else, the relationship with stakeholders is more important than anything. It's more important than your technical know-how. It's more important than any program that you launch. And she says that when she thinks there may be a misunderstanding, or she feels as if things might be on the verge of going off track, she says this thing, and she says to the stakeholder, "Can I just take 5?" And what she means is, can I take 5 minutes just to remind you what we're here for, and then talk about what learning and development is in HCA Healthcare for. What this does within her stories of saying about impact across the organization, she's implicitly stating, if we work like this, you're going to get the most from me. And I think that learning and development is changing so much that Learning and Work Week is a great opportunity for our Take 5. Just to remind our stakeholders, this is what I've been doing over the last 12 months. We've met each other, or we were engaged in this period here, but let me talk about the impact that I've made over here and how working with the team has helped. So it's a brilliant opportunity to Take 5. Why I think that's relevant to the future of workplace learning is that I believe we're at 2 tracks, and this has been also highlighted in the brilliant report that was published last year by Donald Taylor and Agla Vinashkaita, that the future of learning will look like faster version of the same, or way more impactful, because AI, and I know we'll get on to AI will get you faster in whatever direction you are facing, but be really careful not to be facing in the wrong direction, because the future of workplace learning inside any organization will largely depend on the vision that we have for our organization's learning and development, and how we communicate that and build influence in order to implement, deploy not just programs but L&D strategy. Because without that, the expected and requested version of learning and development is really low level maturity, and there is many reasons why it's low level maturity. The low level maturity version is it's a dance that everybody thinks they could do. Stakeholders ask for something, L&D deliver it, and employees go along, and they generally feel happy about having the time away, connecting with great ideas, learning a bit about themselves, connecting with people across the organization, but without anything materially changing. So unless we develop the influence in order to change the perception, to shape the perception, and help people to expect more, then workplace learning will remain the expected and requested. Now, that's not going to last very long, because the expected and requested version of learning and development can already be done by AI. And whether you think it could be done better or not is subjective now. because your influential stakeholders' perception counts more than yours. But the future of learning, which is actually addressing and enhancing performance, which is actually closing skills gaps, which is actually more impactful and a more interesting job, that's all up for grabs. AI cannot do that job right now. So in short, the answer to this question is whatever you want it to be, but just be really, really careful not to deliver the learning and development your organization's asking for, but to prepare them for the learning and development that they actually need to close skills gaps. Does that answer the question, Joe?
It really, really does. And it's really interesting. I use Donald Taylor's model quite a lot when I'm kind of evaluating and putting strategies together, because I think it's about how what the business needs and how it's going to drive business performance versus what you can kind of afford and how you can kind of bring that together. So I'm interested how that model has improved. So I've been reading a lot about the skills economy, and we've done quite a lot of work recently with one organization that's kind of looked at learning and development through creating skills pathways around 5 areas that are really critical to the business. So what would you advise people on this call to look at skills? Because when we go and talk to the business, they start to get you get a completely different question about skill, technical, you kind of get its knowledge base. So when you think about the skills economy and how that is interacting with learning and development, where do you start?
So if I start at the very top, for the first time since I've been in learning and development, which is a long time, we don't have to educate the business on what we're here to do, because skills is a currency that already exists from your CEO to the board to every member of the workforce. They recognise that skills are and skills gaps are either helping them or holding them back, organization-wide or individually. So no education required on that. Very different, Joe, to competencies, capabilities, and behaviours, which I'm not sure we ever got past definitions, because what is it? It's just another HR initiative. Yeah. So skills is a currency. Now, what is it? What does it mean, Joe? I'd say that this in our position is it depends on the rhetoric inside the organization, and that's really critical. We could look at that in L&D, and I see it on LinkedIn all the time. What's a skill? And I just think, stop it. Like, that's the silliest question I've ever heard. Go and ask your CEO what they believe the skills are, because they're already having these conversations. Those skills are holding us back. The questions we need to follow up afterwards is, what specific skills, and let them tell us. Our job's really easy when we stop navel gazing and start thinking about what that actually means. Then, we could use powerful tools such as, Skills GPT, which you'll find on the ChatGPT store, which is completely free, and you can map your skills taxonomy in no time at all. And not just high-level skills. We're not talking skills-based learning as of 4 or 5 years ago, when it was high-level AI literacy or resilience. So, all of that, which was designed by content vendors to engage in their content. Let's be really, really clear. When you're talking about the nuts and bolts of what it takes to actually do a job, you don't just get down into the skills, but also the proficiency levels. So when we're talking about how if this skills-based approach doesn't help learning and development become more potent, it helps everybody across the organization with a level of awareness that we just weren't able to do before. One of the big challenges that everybody joining us here will know is, how do you get people to engage in learning? They've got such a small amount of time. Well, how about you show them how to bridge the proficiency gap in their current role from where they are to where they need to be, highlighting the critical skills, but also how those transfer to in the future to help them achieve their career aspirations. That level of insight helps to direct their attention, but also build the required capability. It's a complete game changer. So my advice is, use a tool. Use a tool like Skills GPT. so that you go from knowing to from assuming to knowing what people need, and then you go from there. But my only other piece of advice is go for something critical. Go for where it really matters. Don't think organization wide. Think we are suffering inside our organization with this critical skills gap. Now we're going to highlight what that actually means. We're going to assess people across our organization, and then we're going to be targeted on helping to bridge proficiency. And then afterwards, after we've learned how to do this, we're going to communicate. We're going to take 5. We're going to re-communicate to our organization that this is the success that we've had by taking a skills-based approach, and then go for the next low-hanging fruit from there.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. That's really, really helpful. If anyone's got any questions, please don't wait to the end. Please add them into the chat. I'm more than happy to throw them at David and Shelley. So I'm going to ask you both the same question now. And, it's something that, could be an elephant in the room for a lot of people. It could feel like cheating sometimes in terms of, AI, and you touched on it a little bit, David, in terms of skills. But, when you're sitting there and thinking about, and you're talking to your CEO or your SLT about the role that AI should play, or emerging tech, it doesn't have to be AI. Where do organizations need to kind of draw the line in terms of L&D? David, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to segue to Shelley.
Yeah, sure. So, so my advice is rewind back to why your L&D team exists inside your organization. And the reason I think we need to do that is traditionally we've been small teams with vast remits. And the only way we've seen that we've been able to do learning and development is top down, one size fits all, largely speaking. So where I say draw the line is don't do that anymore. Like the world doesn't need any more content. Like so thinking that you've got a faster, cheaper route to creating oceans of content, I'd say that is the riskiest place to do L&D, because that one stakeholders can say, can't AI just do that now? Yeah. And the answer is yes. L&D isn't required to do that role. But so where I say draw the line, I say don't do that. But as far as rewind and see what your organization actually needs now, then all bets are off. Use AI as much as you possibly can. I'd say that you could use it in the analysis phase. So in the intersection between business data and HR strategy, if you do report into HR, if not with direct business alignment, asking your AI tool, as long as it's closed off, you've got you're not training the overall tool, feed in your business strategy and ask, how can developing our people help us to achieve this? So at the very earliest stage, then you can do that with when it comes to alignment. With a skills-based approach, organization-wide, as we've suggested, you can map your organization skills, although I recommend, as I said, doing critical skills first, and then help bridge proficiency. So highlight, you could build an assessment tool to understand current levels of proficiency to required levels of proficiency, targeted development, and not just in terms of content. You could build simulations if required in no time at all to actually bridge proficiency. So and then when it comes to assessment and measurement, so understanding current levels of proficiency, so you can measure competency as a result. So in short, I think all bets are off. But if you feel as if you're contributing to what is already an ocean of content, I'd say stop. It's a zero-sum game for all involved. That's my perspective.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. And Shelley, I mean, you work in a regulated environment. Would you concur with what David was saying, or, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with David. I think it's more for me around our levels of comfort and getting cool with it and testing it and playing with it and piloting it, but not, as David's saying, adding to that boatload of content and just throwing stuff out to increase that tick box L&D culture. But being in financial services, a heavily regulated organisation, that is a a queer journey, and there's we've got a role to play with helping to bring people with us with that. We're not using AI here at the Cumberland. We're not using AI in learning half as much as what we should be. So it's not necessarily about drawing the line in terms of stopping us. It's drawing the line in terms of where we start with it, being intentional, and just getting comfortable with it, because I don't think we've got a choice. It's there. It's how we use it.
I think you're right. I think it's like anything. I always remember, and David will remember this, when we first had a conversation when we were doing work together at HarperCollins, and I brought him in his old guys, and we were sitting there with the CPO, and we were kind of thinking about having these daft conversations about watch LMS, and I remember and I still use it, the kind of resources, not courses. A point, and that in the back in the day, we if you could find something on YouTube or Siri, or now it's like literally ChatGPT or whatever, Gemini. So I think it's about really thinking about what is the need, and as you've both sort of said, thinking about that in an organizational context rather than just jumping on the bandwagon, which I would be really interested to know from people that are listening to this today, how many of you are using AI or emerging tech in developing your people strategy in terms of your L&D strategy. Just put yes or no. It would just be good to kind of take a bit of a, fingerprint in terms of, that's amazing. If I'd done this panel a year ago, it's interesting, right?
Yeah, Joe, when you were talking, then it reminded me of, this, do we know how our people are already using it? We talk about AI like as if it's for learning and development, or for the HR function, or for the organization to push out. Folk are using it. People are using it to choose the next job, to figure out that gap. 100%. So if we can enable them to do it in a way which is aligned to our organization, our goals, where we see the next CEO coming from, that's more helpful to us. People are using it. I'm using it myself, and the organization aren't telling me off. So I think it's just if we don't do it, then other people will create the rules themselves.
100%. And interestingly, Trish has just said she's about to host a debate about AI and learning in her organization. I want to ask our colleagues how they're using it, or how they want to use it in their learning and growth. So it goes back to what we were talking about. If you ask people and you take inspiration from that rather than make a massive assumption, I think that's a really strong point. It goes back to, sometimes we think we know what the business wants and needs, but actually if you don't start to engage, as David said and you said, Shelley, then you're sort of in a way creating a version of the truth yourself. And that's where I think learning and development has sometimes got a bad name, for sort of in a way just producing programs and content without the realization of how it impacts. And I know that's not what you do and have been doing, Shelley. So I kind of like to explore a little bit of that, if that's okay with you. And you've done some amazing work at the Cumberland. We've been really lucky to be part of a little part of your journey, but what's it felt like, and give us some examples of what does a genuine learning culture look like in practice, and how have you really worked, and you've worked tirelessly and your team is fantastic at this, but how do you make it tangible for the leaders? Because the Cumberland's got a unique history and is on a unique journey itself at the moment.
We are indeed. Huge transformation underway. The last 8 years, this business is completely different in look and feel as to what it was before. I think when I was thinking about this question, Joe, what came to mind is the fact that we didn't necessarily set out to create a learning culture. That was almost the output. That was what we would get, but our focus was really on how do we create a culture of belonging, which is what our organization has at its core. Our culture was very control and command. We're highly regulated, so learning was safe. It churned out compliance training left, right and center. folk went on stuff, they didn't know why, and that had to stop. We knew that we needed to create something different, not just for the business and because of our purpose, but because that's what the world needs. Businesses, organizations have got a much bigger responsibility now around how we support colleagues in the workplace, and we knew that learning could do so much more in that space. So we started with leaders. We took them on a journey of exploring 3 simple things: authenticity. So who are you? Truly, who are you in this business? What talents do you bring? How do we learn from those? How do we use them? Vulnerability. So recognizing that ability to be compassionate as a leader and to bring people with you, but also love. What place does love have in leadership to really get people connecting to something way deeper? And so we did a lot of that work with our leaders, but then wider to that, we created 2 spaces, our power hours, which was democratized learning on, it was stuff. There was some of those tick box skills that we churned out, because you've got to remember, you've got to take people on a journey. You can't just take it out and then expect people to just go, yeah, no, I love this new way of doing things. But they really created a space to think. So they not only created the space to learn in those power hour spaces, in those virtual spaces, but the learning continued, because the content and the topics that people were exploring were really human, really real, really about stuff that mattered to them. And we knew that because we'd asked them. We'd went out and asked, what are you interested in? What are you curious about? What are the causes that you're interested in? So things like poverty, suicide awareness within the county, things that were really important to them because of where we live, the communities that we serve, and our customers as well. So the Live in the Hives was probably where we started to really see this culture come to life, because they were spaces where we just said, who wants to get up and share passions on a particular topic. Nice. It could be crochet, it could be report writing. It was everything in between those 2 things. And so colleagues gave up their time to come together and to share those things. And we as a team helped people with developing that content, developing those presentations. So we learned as well. We learned about them and what they were interested in. And that it was really subtle what happened, but it was at that point that we started to realize that this stuff happens without learning and development. So if this stuff can happen without learning and development, who are we? Where do we focus? And so the navel gazing stopped, David, which was really good. And we started to really start to think about and support the organisation with the strategy, with the culture, and learning started to have a real impact on what this business wants to be when it grows up. And that's the journey of transformation that we've been on. So we've just hit what I think in our learning culture is version 1.0 of ourselves. We're now starting to try and figure out what's this version 2.0. So that's the next exciting part of things, but making it stick. Let them stick it. We don't stick it. The colleagues in the business, that they do that if you get it right.
Well, you make a really interesting point, don't you? That fundamentally we're conditioned, and I did this when I was a director of learning, that we think if we build it, they will come, that kind of old Field of Dreams piece. But that isn't the case, because there's so much choice. You've both sort of said that. So how do you make it relevant? How do you make it stickable? And how do you make it important at the end of the day? And I think that's really critical from moving from a reactive learning and development space to a proactive L&D space. But we hear a lot, and I'd be really interested in both of you answering this, about the ROI. So I don't want it to be the elephant in the room, and I'm not talking about the happy sheets after a lunch and learn or anything. But if you're sitting down with a CEO or an SLT, and they're saying, "Look, it's all very well, but what's the return on investment of me giving a monkeys about any of this? What have you seen work, and how do you approach that conversation, and what should people be measuring, basically? Shell, do you want to take it first?
Oh, do I want to take it first? Yes. Do you know, we don't do a boatload of happy sheets, and we don't do a boatload of measuring either, Jo.
Brilliant.
We work really hard at understanding from our senior team what matters most, where are we going to make the difference. And in a lot of those areas, Jo, it's quite qualitative. It's just a knowing. It's just it sounds really like as if I'm not answering the question, because we don't do those hard measures. We know it's working. We're seeing the difference in our culture. We're seeing the difference in our Be Heard, our engagement scores. We can see it in the progression, so we can see that it's working.
Yeah.
And it's being talked about. Our senior team, we talk about skills, we talk about learning culture. They're really part and parcel of it. So I think I can see it, but I don't probably have like that hard, fast, Jo, this is what we do.
And I think that that's just as important. I think it's important to have a feeling, and you're seeing it in different. So while you're not tangibly measuring it in terms of, pounds and, per person and all of those types of things, but the fact that you're talking about retention, you're talking about belonging, you're talking about progression, all of those things are important for why people are staying and want to be part of the Cumberland journey. I think it's a byproduct, rather than what a lot of people do is I've got to justify my existence as an L&D team. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
It is, and I think it's a really hard balance, because we are with that central service, and I think those you tend to be, when I first came into the profession, you were a cost to the organisation, and I think we've got to challenge that. Everybody's a cost to the organisation. I don't see everyone else churning out MI reports left, right, and centre to prove their worth and their being. I think it does take a different type of confidence and a different type of conversation with your senior team to get them comfortable with it as well.
That makes complete sense. So David, obviously with 360 Learning, you must be asked this quite a lot in terms of, from L&D directors, but also from board. So what are you seeing in this space? I'm sure you agree with Shelley in some instances, but what else are you seeing, or you're having conversations about in that ROI piece?
Yeah, so again, I'm writing a book on how L&D can increase its influence, and so the long answer is your measurement should reflect where your L&D function is and where it wants to go. So if your L&D function is say an L&D shop front with programs, content and platform, then your measure should be engagement, because that's what you're selling. But if you are looking to get closer to the business and engage in those conversations with senior and influential stakeholders, then that's your strategy. And so your measurement should be to what extent you're doing that. Like what conversations are you having? What levels of fulfillment do you have? But if your strategy is to align with the business strategy, then you'll be able to draw a line between the business strategy, where it is, the movement that's been made, and some contribution. Kevin M. Yates talks brilliantly. He's the L&D detective, if anybody doesn't know. He says that you should never look for isolated L&D metrics in that regard, because it takes a village. But if you were there in the initial conversations and you are aligned and made a contribution, then you should attribute your contribution to outcome. So if your strategy is business alignment, then you should tag your journey as well as what the business was able to achieve, to say we were involved. But if your strategy is a skills-based approach, then you need to be looking at the critical skills across your organization, and to what extent you understand where you are and where things have moved, and so you can draw a line as well. We had a good comment on here about people leaving, and again, when you align your L&D strategy to a business goal, which is attrition, then you're able to state that this was the case before, this is what we did, and this is the case now. Not to say that learning and development was the only factor. You probably want to paint a fuller picture about what are the other conditions that may have changed as a result, or the focus for everybody else, but you need to paint a picture. And in the case of politics, influence and power, what I found in my research is learning and development people would rather their good work speaks for itself. Bad news is it doesn't, and everybody other business function knows this. So we need to apply what's known as strategic attribution to say that this is the situation before, this is what we did, this is what happened as a result, so that we are blowing our own trumpet. It gets us from political naivety to a political player, and that doesn't need to be a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're a manipulator. It means that you're in control of the L&D narrative. And at these times where L&D resources may be under scrutiny, it's never been more important for L&D to say, this is what we're involved in, and this is the result of the investment in learning and development, to be on the front foot. If in the short term, and as a minimum, you're controlling the L&D narrative, you're taking 5 across the whole organization to say, this is what we do. And on the far end, you are fighting for valuable resources so that we can do the really important work inside our organizations to ensure that people are equipped today and the organization is agile for tomorrow.
Brilliant. Thank you. I've got a question for you, David, from Kelly. I've seen a buzzword over the last few years, gamification. Yeah, I agree with you, Kelly. I've heard that a lot. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I do. I think that if we gamified work, then I think that more work would get done. But be really careful. When you gamify the instructions for doing work, which is learning, I don't think you're going to get anywhere near the results that you want. I once heard a learning tech provider boasting that they had to turn their game off in the organization because it was becoming a distraction. And I just rolled my eyes. I thought, this is so silly.
Lord.
That's stopping people working. Now, I do believe in game mechanics, but only in service of what you're trying to achieve. And I think that impactful learning and development, if it's solving a problem, if it is aligned to the strategy or skills-based, then you should be measuring just how little time you're taking people away from the work to achieve the results. Efficiency is a key tenet of capitalism, and you know that's the game we all play. When you don't know what the ends are, then you make learning the ends, and so you want more time spent learning because you're not measuring the outcome. So it is a level of maturity. But if your end is to help people to become more equipped at what they're doing efficiently and bridge the skills gaps, then gamification might help you to do that. But if you're lower down the food chain and your game is to keep people learning in your platform to justify learning and development, you're playing the wrong game.
Brilliant. Thank you. Really, really helpful. Shelley, can I come to you? There's a question from Julie. What are your thoughts on reflective practice at individual and team level? So I've heard this a lot in terms of coaching and mentoring, but do you have a view here?
Yeah, I think it's crucial. I think it's really important. I don't think we give ourselves enough time to just think, to step back and think, did this do what I thought it was going to do? Where am I? What have I learnt? Who do I need to support me? We build it into the majority of the work that we do, whether it's team coaching circles, we bring people together. We also have, we use what we call voice, which is a way of putting problem statements into the middle of the room and going round and giving everybody a chance to share their thoughts on it. So as well, bringing reflective practice into day-to-day conversations. We try to build it in, but it's crucial, Jo. You've got to create that space for people to think deeply.
I think it also goes back to the different ways in which people learn. So I learn from conversation. my partner is much more of a reflector and will listen to something and then reflect and then come back. So if we're creating learning experiences that are all about doing, and you've got to be kind of in the moment and there, then we're not really appealing to the myriad of ways and personalities and types of ways of which people learn. It becomes a bit of, like David was saying, it's kind of just a way of churning content and approach out. I think it's quite an important part of the evolution of the way that we work now, which is less coming together and more isolated sometimes. I think it's quite interesting. So I've got one more question. Do we think that AI can play the part of skills evaluator, coach as a mirror and prompt for reflective practice? I'm going to ask you both very, very quickly because we're coming to the end. David, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So Stanford actually published a paper earlier this year and talked about AI as a reflective partner, not in learning separate from work, but in work itself. So after meetings and after certain engagements in the calendar, to spend time to ask questions on the work itself. And I think that is incredibly powerful. We're not looking at simply increasing the value of learning investment, but actual investment in the work. So I think it's incredibly powerful. And I think it goes back to what I mentioned before. If you're looking at how to use AI to make L&D more effective without going back to the beginning and thinking how is it we're helping to enhance performance and close skills gaps, then I think we're only using part the puzzle. But I think that skills evaluator, I think it's a tough ask. If you said skills mapping and skills assessment built and validated, built by AI but validated by humans, and the assessment done by humans, then I think so. I think in skills, do you know what? And then I just talk myself out of it. When you think about how it's being used in contact centres and assessments, like objective assessments done against people who are getting exceptional results, then yeah, I think that it can be used. I think as coach, I think it could be exceptional, but again, we've got to set the criteria for that, because we can't just open it up and hope that ChatGPT can be a good coach, because without the prompt, then I think that it can be pretty dreadful. But I think in short, yes. But I'd love to know, Shelley, what your perspective is.
Oh, Jenny, do you know what? I'm going to take this away and I'm going to see how this feels for myself, because my instinct was, yeah, you can. I think that there's something for me, especially on that coach or as a mirror, that we've got to be really intentional about. I'm really interested in the next generation of young people entering our workforce. And let's be honest, if I had the choice to go to AI or choice to go to that stakeholder in order to help hold the mirror up and ask for that feedback, I would probably choose the AI, because it's uncomfortable sitting face to face with someone, asking someone for that feedback, or really helping them explore something, whatever that might be. And I think that there is so much in the uncomfortableness of it being human to human. So yes, you can, but that's alongside, especially in those moments of development and change, of it being with somebody else, with another colleague.
And I think you're both right in lots of ways. I would really hate to feel that human quality is diminished, and that we take the shortcuts. And I definitely think there's a place for AI in learning and development. I concur with what you've both said, but I think you have to be intentional and work out why that the Simon Sinek's golden circle: why, what, and how. So brilliant. We've gone through a myriad, from AI to strategy to kind of really understanding how to move from reactive to proactive. So thank you, David and Shelley, for your words of wisdom and for your insights. There's some great examples and tools. And as I said at the beginning, if you want to connect with David and Shelley, And please feel free to, they're both on LinkedIn, but if you want their details, then please come back to us. We're happy to share. Now, this wouldn't be an LTT Learning at Work week, and it wouldn't be a panel if we didn't give you some freebies at the end. So if you want to download our performance development white paper, it's new and improved for 2026. Please feel free to download that. There's the QR code there on the screen, but please feel free to download. I don't know, Lydia, if you are posting anything, but if you're not, then please download that webinar. The Learning at Work week continues. We've started off with a bang for absolute sure, but we've got some great other sessions this week. So we've got, in partnership with the 3rd chapter, What Midlife Teaches Us About How We Grow, with Remy, and a brilliant panel. So that's on Wednesday if you want to join. And as I've been talking about the different ways in which we work, neurodiversity and inclusive leadership really comes to mind. So if you're thinking about how you are embracing neurodiversity yourself, or if you're thinking about how you increase the compassion of your leaders, then please feel free to join that. That rounds off our week on Friday. And then if you want to keep the conversation going, there is no sell, I can assure you, but we post all of our webinars and sneaky peeks of content through our 2 WhatsApp channels. Again, you can join using that QR code, but everything will be sent through at the end. That's no problem at all. And finally, if you want to have a free 30-minute conversation with me or a member of my team, or you want me to connect you with David and Shelley, and you have conversations with them about the work that they're doing, or even about 360 learning, you're putting that into your organization, then please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to chat to you. So have an amazing Learning at Work week, everybody. I love David's phrase about taking 5. I'm going to take 5 before my next meeting. I hope the panel are too. And thank you so much for your words of wisdom and your support throughout the years to me personally, but also in the work that you do. I'm really looking forward to seeing both of your journeys, and I'm especially excited to read your book, David, once you've kind of finished that. So thank you, Shelley. Thank you, David. Have a wonderful week, everybody, and see you as the week goes on. Thank you very much, everybody.